Then we'll set up a meeting with you guys. Yeah. I made like a it's like you guys can exercise. You need to think about one thing, right?
Yeah. I guess
And then once you start getting ready to towards the light. Have you all been scanned? I don't have a QR code. I don't have a scan because I can just put it in my name. It doesn't.
Yeah, she's like
Oh, oh, I mean, that's
oh, she's yeah. Oh, I've raised it. Oh, yeah.
Hi everyone. So mic on, you can hear me. Thank you for coming out today. So this is our second meeting. We're doing both in person and online, but from now on, we're probably going to move back to in person because NYU just opened up that like availability. So if you are on the YouTube right now on the screen, hello, welcome. Make sure you come in person next meeting. Hopefully we can have this room again. If we don't, you'll find out in the newsletter which room we'll be in. But today we're going to go over product casing. So this is product casing 2.0. If you came to our meeting last semester with Alex, he talked about product casing in the sense of product design. So how would you build XYZ product for XYZ function? We're going to take this a little bit further. We're going to show you 3 different types of questions that are really common in a product interview. The last one will be that going over again that product design question that Alex talked about, but we're also going to mention a few other ones that just to give you guys the framework and make sure you're prepared if you do end up wanting to go into product. So it'll be me, and then we also have Andre over here who's sitting down on his phone to walk you guys through product casing. Fun fact, Andre has not seen the slides, so this will be his first attempt at doing it, and maybe you'll get like, you know, a live experience. You get to watch him do what he would do in an actual interview. Oh. All right. Okay, but first we're going to go over weekly updates like we always do. So 3 things that my VP put down here. We got Frontier and Spirit collab. Has anyone seen that? Anyone seen what they're doing? Does anyone want to talk about it if they have seen it? No? Okay, that's fine. So Frontier and Spirit are 2 of the US low budget airlines. They're actually merging. And they're saying the merge is going to be really good because it's going to give these 3 stakeholders, the consumer, shareholders, and team, as in like their internal employees, these benefits. So that's what the companies are saying. Other people are saying that it's actually the opposite. We're not getting these benefits. For example, like team, they said they're going to give 10,000 new jobs. When you merge 2 companies together, what happens? Layoffs happen. That's not 10,000 new jobs. So if you're interested in like the airline area, this might be something you want to follow. Second thing is Spotify's $100 million promise. So if you guys have been watching the Spotify tech news, you'll know that a lot of really prominent players on the Spotify platform have withdrawn their content because of Rogan and how like he has very controversial podcasts. And he has very controversial guests that he features on his podcast, therefore giving them a platform to talk about certain things that may or may not be true. So right now, Spotify is investing $100 million towards like historically marginalized groups. So trying to give those groups a platform. And the CEO of Spotify actually told his team in a memo that like he doesn't believe in silencing Rogan. And I guess like instead what they want to do is just amplify the voices of others. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Like, do you think that this is a good move? Do you think this is like a PR move? Anyone? You're shaking your head. No thoughts, or you don't like it?
No thoughts.
No thoughts, brain empty. Okay, so the third thing is, are Tesla cars safe? So this week, Tesla actually issued 2 recalls. And Tesla has been kind of fighting the government for a bit. The government, not a big fan of what Tesla's doing. The like National Traffic Highway Association, something like that. They're not a big fan. Basically, the regulators can only take action after something is released. So like Tesla gives a software update, regulation doesn't like that, then they're like, hey, you got to recall it. What's interesting is that in the past with cars, when you recall a car, you got to like take it back to the dealership, take it back to the shop, like take the physical car back. And it's like a whole thing. But now we're kind of moving towards like cars becoming computers, cars becoming electronic devices where Tesla can push a software update. No one has to bring their car back to the garage. And therefore, it just kind of feels like, you know, when you update your app in the App Store and you're just like, oh, update, and then you're fine. Like, it doesn't feel like a recall. You don't feel like there's any danger happening. It's not like a product recall where like the grocery store is saying, oh my God, you might get salmonella, like, don't eat it, throw it away. So kind of interesting how we're moving in the automobile area. If you're interested in like that law aspect and how that intersects with tech, this would be something cool to follow.
I think you had something to say earlier. Did you raise your hand? Sorry to call you out, but
Yeah, feel free to speak.
For the Spotify thing, I mean, I think it's slightly a PR move. I can tread that line. It's just because they spent, I think, 100 million on.
They did. It's
something
the
like that.
exact same amount that they spent. So on Rogan's deal, they spent 100 million to get his content exclusive to the platform. Now they're spending 100 million to invest in other voices. Same exact deal. Yeah.
What the company was, the name of it, there was some other company, I think, like Florida or something, that offered him $100 million also to like switch to Spotify. I mean, to their platform, to Spotify.
Interesting.
He censored.
Okay. Spotify is giving $100 million deals to everyone. Anyone else have anything they want to chime in?
Yeah, for the Spotify thing, I mean, I'm not in support of just leaving the stuff on there, but I feel like realistically, you can't really expect them to take $100 million deal off their platform business wise. So I think this is the best move they could have done.
So like incorporating like realistically what they need to have profit, you know.
Yeah, I just have some thoughts on the Partner and Spirit merger. So that I think they're going to become like the largest airline in the US. And like so, the idea that they're going for, the strategy they're going for is to compete with the big four, right? United, American, and the fourth one, I remember. So that's what they want to do together. And I think they're mainly based in Orlando. I think that's where the strongest suit will be once they merge.
Yeah. I think they're definitely trying to have like a fight in the airline play. I think just some of the analysts were they were questioning what the companies were saying, you know, like no company's going to go out there and be like, we're merging so we could beat the other companies. So right now they're trying to go by it by being like, oh, look at the jobs, look at the money we'll make.
I think it is interesting too, like, this is yearly, like, overall airline rating that gets up by the Wall Street Journal. And I think it was either Frontier or Spirit, they used to be like 4th or 5th by rating, even considering their like shitty experience, because the fares were so cheap. They like tanked like 11th in the US, because they had a lot of delays, they had a lot of like issues getting staff to their like jobs. Because it's also a little bit of that, like they're commenting on these new jobs with those political stuff, but also commenting on their like nosedive in those rankings. A lot of people are using that.
The airline industry is like interesting right now because COVID. Like we were gonna go back to traveling, but like now Omicron, maybe we're not traveling. What's up?
I think with Tesla, it's kind of interesting with this road software update. I feel like it can almost make it safer cars because you get a recall. A lot of people aren't going to bring in their cars just because they're too lazy to. But having a software update, you kind of force them to do it because it just kind of happens. There's not anything on the user side that needs to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Overall, it's safer.
How many of you like trust like a cruise taxi, an improved cruise, like a completely autonomous taxi, but I get you from point A to B right now? But yeah, just like raise your hand.
You can have a mic.
There's no bigger problem, I was just curious. Like, it was like interesting, like how do you like learn if it's safe, right? Like as like a Tesla owner, like how do you know if this update's being safe? You trust Tesla, they give you like the real implications of what's going on, like why they're updating things that didn't go well. Like how that display on this tablet in your car, you got on your phone.
Well, most of the time they're just updating because the government's like, hey, don't do that, recall it. And then Tesla like slips it in an update and then the government gets mad.
Yeah, exactly.
What I thought was funny was Tesla actually, they had a feature where they actually put in a rolling stop. Have you guys heard of that? Do you know that? They built it into the car. Like this is a thing. That's illegal in a lot of places. Like, you know, when you go to driver's ed and you're gonna fail your driver's test if you have a rolling stop. So the government got real mad about that, made them like get rid of it and like recall it. But their recall again was just taking it out of the software. So like in the new update, you just don't have it. I think it's interesting.
Does this work? Yes.
Yay. Okay. Any last thoughts before we move on? And before we start the meeting, just a reminder, our programs open this Friday. All 3 of our programs are on the same application cycle. So easy to remember. Friday, February 11th, closes next Friday. If you haven't subscribed to our mailing list yet, please do so right now. Just scan this QR code because then you'll get notified when everything is out. Okay, so now moving into the meeting. Like I mentioned before, we talked about product design with Alex last semester. We're still going to go over that. But I also want to talk about estimation questions and product strategy questions. So this is kind of in order of what's least common to what's most common, these 3 questions. But it's still helpful to know how to do it. And also, not all of these are just directly for PM. Like this is like product in general. Like if you want to go into product strategy, you should know how to answer a product strategy question. A lot of business rules in tech might have you do estimation questions, you know, so this is useful in a lot of different cases as well. So first, let's talk about estimation questions. I'm going to give you a few examples. We're not going to answer them yet, but later we're going to pick a few. Maybe I'll grill Andre. But this is like what I'm talking about. Has anyone seen this type of question before? Yeah, where did you?
I've seen like, I know they do interviews, they'll ask you like how many windows are there in New York City or something.
Yeah. Could you can you figure out what they're trying to test you basically on?
It's like trying to see how you break down a complicated question to like little parts.
Yeah. So I would say this question is like very similar to if you've done consulting questions also. You're trying to take like exactly like what you said, you're trying to take this big thing, break into little parts. They're also trying to test like, do you make logical assumptions? And then on top of that, like if you make an assumption that doesn't really make sense, can you catch that and just tell your interviewer, oh, I made a mistake, like let me go back, fix this because XYZ reason, you know? So let's break down how you would go through it. This is one of the approaches. Obviously, with every question, there's a lot of different approaches with how you want to do different things. But this is easy one to remember: clarify, approach, and validate. So when we talk about clarifying, it's really just trying to understand exactly what the interviewer wants you to do. And honestly, I would say you want to clarify in front of like almost every type of casing question you ever have. Because if you're answering the wrong question, you're just out. So first, you're going to ask them questions. And then second, you're going to want to list off the constraints you have. A lot of people like to use TLS, which is time, location, segment. What I'm talking about here is if the question is given, what was it, windows in New York City, like that, what constraints do you have? So you have location, New York City. Segment, I guess like windows, but maybe be like, what kind of windows are we talking about? You know, like apartment windows, like what is a window? Now we're getting philosophical, but what is a window? So you want to clarify exactly what it is that you want to answer and make sure each part is defined. And then you're going to move on to your approach. So this will be three things. This will be your formula that you're going to write. You're going to calculate it. You're going to break it down, then you're going to calculate it. So when I say formula, like, do not get freaked out. It's not calculus. It's like very easy, like this equals this times this. And you can give super round numbers. Like you can be like, oh, I think that there are like, I don't know, like 20 million this and this, you know, like, and then you just multiply things by 20. So don't be afraid to just give very simple numbers and be like, oh, for the simplicity of calculations, I'm gonna go with this number. And that's like a pretty valid reason. And then last, you want to validate. So you want to show that once you arrive at an answer, you can like double check it. So you can do this in two ways. You can either do this through a different approach. So if you had in mind a different formula, you're like, okay, now I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna try it this way. Like I'm gonna try two sets of logic. And if they arrive to like similar numbers, I feel that my answer is pretty valid. You can also try using industry assumptions. So you arrive to an answer and then you can compare it to something else in the industry. So if you, I don't know, somehow randomly know how many doors are in New York City, you could do something with that. I don't know why you know that, but you could do something with that.
Also, for like all of these questions, it's always nice to kind of remind the interviewer like where you are in the process. Like for you, you may be like totally on board with where your like mind is going, right? Like this is all what you're thinking about, but like sometimes it might not be clear to them. So like it's good to say like, okay, like now we've clarified this, this, and this. Let's move on to like my overall approach to this question. Or like at the end, like I assume these things, like it was under these like time, location, segment, constraints, and like maybe this is a way I'd approach it differently to like validate it further. Like it's good to remind them that it helps make you seem more like rational in this very tech way.
It really helps. Like honestly, the interviewer is just trying to make sure you're communicating stuff to them and saying things that you might be like, oh, this is stupid, this is redundant. Like, why should I state like, this is my constraints, like this is my formula, and now I will do this. Like seems very robotic and like, why? But they can't read your mind. So it's very helpful for them to have that structure, like Andre's saying. So moving on to like what kind of estimation we might be talking about. These are two really common types. I'm sure there are more types that can be out there, but pretty common. You might have a sizing question and then you might have a volume question. So sizing question, like the one we were talking about with the windows, what, like how many blah, blah, what's the size basically. And then you might also have volume, which is like consumption. How much is a product consumed? And again, some tips, like you're going to use round numbers, like I mentioned, use MECE. So if you guys remember, I think I have it on a later slide, but it's something that Alex talked about at our last meeting, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. So that's meaning that we want to make sure all our definitions are not overlapping each other, but we have covered all our bases. Again, you want to own up to any errors you have. I feel like, especially in the tech industry, they're very open to having interviews like a conversation. And if you mess up, it's okay. In fact, I personally think, and like, I feel like people who have interviewed in tech might have similar experiences, but if you mess up and you own up to it, and then you say like, oh, I did this wrong in the future, or like, I would like to change it right now by doing X, Y, Z, like, that's really good. That's a sign that when you're on the actual job and you mess up, you're gonna fix your work. And then finally, make sure you justify your assumptions. This is just making sure you're reasoning through everything. And again, communicate this to your interviewer. Do not just assume things in your head and be like, oh, they'll know. It's better to like over communicate your stuff rather than make assumptions and your interviewer's like, where the hell are they getting like this logic or these numbers? Okay, so back to example questions. Does anyone have a favorite out of these 5 that we can like go through? Just you shout out a number, 1 through 5.
4.
4. We like 4. Okay. So 4 is a little tricky. 4 is how would you measure the success of the Netflix recommendation engine? Does anyone have thoughts on where you would even start?
There's no right answer.
People want to clarify like what success means.
Okay, good. We're starting with questions. Yay! So how would you measure the success? Let's say success is how many people watch the shows that are in that list that's like recommended for you. Like how many of those are actually clicked on? Let's say that's success. So we've got that. Anyone else have any clarifying questions?
Clarifying, but you want to like establish a control of the baseline.
Okay, wonderful.
A random assortment of shows. How often people come.
A quick little button for jargon, that like success metric will often be called a North Star metric. It's like the overall number you're trying to like work towards.
If you want to like throw that in your interview, be like, oh yes, this is going to be my North Star metric. I think they'll like it. Okay, so we've defined what success is. We're going to establish a control group. We're going to have a very nice experiment. Anything else that you would want to bring up at the beginning?
You want to clarify what market, what year.
Yeah, so we have to look at our constraints. So remember TLS. So I think we might want to, in this case, do location and segment. So the Netflix recommendation engine might be super different between different countries. Like we don't know. So let's go with it's in the US. And for segment, let's say we're going to go with just all Netflix users, anyone who has a paid account. That's the people we're looking at. Okay, I feel like we're doing pretty good with our clarifying, making our constraints. So let's move on to our approach. So what are the estimations you would make to actually find a number for this? Anyone have ideas?
Total number of Netflix users in the US given the constraints. Like that would be the first estimation you come up with, the larger number.
Yeah. So we have to estimate the total number of our Netflix users with paid accounts in the United States. Any guesses on what that is? We can try by doing
I don't think the number of users is that relevant to like measuring the success. I feel like the delta between like what it is now and what it is in the future might be more important.
So you see,
Personally.
Andre has like a different opinion on this, and that's like the beauty of tech questions is there's no right answer. Just come up with something that goes from point A to point B with like little steps in between.
Hours watched of content.
Hours watched of content. So
That would be a metric you use to measure it. And it's like
okay. So we also have hours watched. So that is going in a different direction than like click-through rate kind of. So you can tell like already we have a lot of different things. Which way do you wanna, how do you wanna spin this?
I mean, so let's just say you're the interviewer, like they already defined like the North Star metric could be like click through for like the first 5 recommended for you, right? So like, I don't know if I can think of a way like right now off the top of my head, I could bring in like hours watched into that easily. So I'd probably just like stick with that as like a more clear objective, especially if this is like a 4 to 5 minute answer. I'd probably just only talk about how I measure that one number personally. Yeah. I think like going back to like the constrained segments and like time type thing, I probably segment this one a lot. Like this is a very like clear number you can measure, and they already like Grace already said that like it's for all Netflix users, right? Something like focusing on like the number of people in the US would be like that helpful for me. It's really just about like seeing how many people click through and like what kind of information we can gather around like maybe differences in the types of users we have and like the numbers that like the different numbers for that North Star metric. So like for me, when I was thinking about it, I'd probably like split the measurement amongst like different devices, like under the caveat that we're using the same engine for everything. Like maybe there's a difference between what people click on Android or like on the web app. Like maybe it's displaying differently, and that's something we can learn from. Maybe like maybe accounts with more than one profile are interacting with those differently. Like maybe my parents are recommending me a show that they saw, and like that's impacting my like click-through rate. Like I try and set up a lot of tests around that. Then I would say like maybe we can see what success means for different types of users that way. That's probably how I answer this question.
So like more like the qualitative part of how to measure success versus quantitative.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
so
we assign numbers to all of those things, right? So it's still going back to like how many people are clicking on these shows and like that are like said labeled under like the For You header on the site.
so when you got to like the formula and the calculation part, this is something I should have brought up before. You can see from like questions 1 and 2, you're probably going to come to like a number, like an actual number, like very round, even number. I would say for questions 3, 4, and 5, you're not going to come to a number. You might come to a formula. So you might say, I'm measuring success by how many people are clicking on the recommendation. I'm going to do that by doing number of Netflix users in the US who have like their recommendation times click-through rate, and I will calculate click-through rate by doing this. So you'll have formulas, but you won't actually have a number. So I should have mentioned that earlier. You can answer it in different ways. So like if you're like, fuck, I don't know, like I don't have a number. As long as you show your logic that goes into answering the question, you'll do okay. So like Andre just went through like all the steps he would do basically.
Yeah, like I said, that's what I'd measure first, but like I didn't say how it actually like what I consider a success, right? So like, okay, now I have like all these segments that we can compare differences across. Like maybe like there's an ad push going on at the same time, and I could say to my manager or like the interviewer, right, like there's like an ad push. Maybe we have like a goal of like increasing it by a certain percentage, right? We can see over time if that happens. Or we could, if we have like any information on our like industry competitors, we can compare against that, right? Because I know if we're doing better, like maybe people are liking our product more, we consider that success. But yeah, like those aren't numbers, right? Like it doesn't matter if it's like 8% or like 90%. They'll probably just give you like some random number, and like I think it's like kind of like a trap to say like let's increase it by like I don't know 10%, right? Like why does that factor matter? So like try and ground it in something that's like industry standard or like compared to something else we're spending money on. Yeah.
The KPI part, I feel like is like not particularly complicated to come to like the metric, I guess. So you want to look more at like what are the different ways you could measure using KPI.
And like why does that matter? Right? Like yeah, you can measure anything, right? But like
So you're like, these are several ways to measure something. I think this is the best way because it does this. I don't know. Karan, do you have a question?
Yeah, it would also help to like sort of memorize some numbers, right? Like, I don't know, if you knew YouTube's total revenue, that could probably help you answer question 2. So would you recommend like learning some numbers, some common numbers, obviously not something very specific? And if so, like where would you find some sources?
Common numbers. I feel like
Population.
yeah, population in the US, or like basic measurement things. Like if they ask you they might not ask you something specific to a company. Oh, by the way, all the questions I put up here are questions that I found online that have actually been asked by tech companies. So they have actually asked this in the past, but they might also ask you about gas stations. And then you're like, okay, that has nothing to do with the company. So it's really hard to, I think, prep for what numbers you would want to have. So I don't know if there are like certain things I can give you that's like, you should memorize these facts. But you can just be really honest and be like, I'm going to assume this, but I don't know anything about the gas station industry. So like, you let me know if my number is very far off. And like, you can work with your interviewer.
But I will say, you should know the population of New York. You should know the population of the US, like just like generally like 250 million in the US. And then you can just use that for like a lot of these questions. But
Yeah.
those are two that like, I think you should have. You should have.
Can you go over one or two?
Go over one or two? Yeah, so we can do two. How much revenue does YouTube make per day? So that's kind of one of these typical questions. This is like, I feel like it's like a sizing question, size of revenue. YouTube, so first, how much revenue does YouTube make per day? So first, we want to ask the clarifying question. So we're going to talk about
What
like-
do y'all think the
okay.
clarifying question should be? Yeah. We have time.
Like, are we talking overall revenue, or are we talking just from like their own original content or from other creators?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different ways YouTube can make revenue.
How does YouTube make money?
Yeah,
Ads,
Ads.
one.
Oh, YouTube, whatever, the premium solution.
R-
subscription.
Red, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So subscription. Anything else?
Licensing.
Maybe. Okay. So that's already like 3 ways you can segment this, right?
yeah, so let's, and then you'll ask your interviewer this. You can also ask like location-wise, you can ask like a lot of different ways to get constraints, but let's say to simplify, we want to do revenue purely from ads in like, and location doesn't matter. Or just like YouTube as a whole with ads. So now that you've clarified what the actual question is, we want to move on to actually making the formula. So with ads, YouTube makes money, I believe, if a user watches an ad to completion. So if you click on an ad and then you click the little skip button, I don't think, or is that for content
It might be
creators?
variable. Like it might be cheaper if they skip.
Yeah, so you might want to ask that question also. You're like, okay, we're talking about ads, like, what about the skip feature? So for simplicity's sake, let's say any ad shown on YouTube will make them a couple cents. So now we're like, okay, how many ads are shown on YouTube? From there, I might want to think, how many videos are on YouTube per day, like watched per day, and what percentage of them have ads? I'm going to assume that YouTube wants to put ads on a lot of their videos, to earn money. I'm also going to assume that a lot of content creators want to put ads on their videos as well, because they also want to make money. So I'm going to say the percentage of ads that are on videos played on YouTube daily is 70%. And that's just based on my personal experience, and that's based on my line of reasoning. From there, I'm going to estimate that the number of videos shown on YouTube per day is the population of the US is 300 million. Not everyone is watching YouTube every day. So let's cut it down and say that the people watching YouTube every day is 50 million people are watching a video in the US. And from that 50 million, you might watch a couple videos. So you might get like 2 ads a day. So we're at 100 million. 100 million ads are being shown a day at YouTube. So from there, I'm going to say that for each ad shown, YouTube earns just like a couple cents. So let's say for each ad shown, YouTube is earning like 5 cents, like very little. Ads don't make a lot until they build up. So now just multiply that by the number of ads I said, 100 million, and then I have my number. I would want to validate that by comparing YouTube revenue to similar industry revenues. So you don't have to know the exact numbers that other industries make, but you could just say like how you would do it. So like I would want to make sure my answer is correct and make sure YouTube's on a good track by looking at other video platforms that offer like different things. So like you could also compare YouTube to like what's a free like Twitch. Vimeo, is that still around? Kind of. So I would talk about that.
Facebook videos themselves, like in their newsfeed. I'd also probably like caveat like a percentage, like I just acknowledge like a certain percentage also go back to the creators. You'd have like subtract that from the 5 cents too.
You can also like make assumptions. So like I should have explicitly been like, I'm not going to factor in creators in this scenario. Like I should have explicitly said that. I thought that in my head. I did not say it to you guys. So you guys don't know that I was thinking that. Does that help?
And again, like the numbers are like ballpark, right? Like it doesn't really matter. It's you're trying to show that you're thinking through all these things. Because like in practice, when you're working, like you'll learn all those numbers over time. The harder thing is knowing like how to contextualize them.
Any last thoughts on estimation before we go on? Yes.
So it seems like some of these questions are pretty like process focused. I mean, don't get me wrong, like 1 and 2 are like they still have their process, but it's more around the outcome. So is it kind of regardless, like you're just kind of trying to walk through your thought process? It's not necessarily about the answer you get to.
Yeah. So 100%. Like in the beginning, I think I said estimation questions is trying to test how you break down something and your logic behind it. So as long as your steps are reasonable, if your answer is like completely wrong, no one cares.
How long is this whole answer supposed to be?
Little faster than what I just did right now.
I feel like 3 to 4 minutes ballpark, but also like going a little longer with mine, so I give a lot of context.
I feel like tech interviewers have never cut me off though.
Yeah, it's like if you're like being logical, you're not like they'll cut you off if you're like dilly-dally.
If you're like going really long, you're like, oh.
They'll just say like, okay, like assume this, like continue. Yeah.
Are you like working on it on a piece of paper and being silent, or are you like talking out loud?
I talk out loud. Like you could see me right now. I was pacing and just like kind of saying things out loud. That's how I interview.
I personally would always ask for like, especially for like some of the bigger questions I think we'll get into later, I'd ask for like a minute and I'd write stuff down. And then that's also why I'd like repeat where I'm at, because I'd be referencing my paper a lot, which they obviously can't see.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So like Alex, I know he likes to have a little piece of paper and scribble stuff down. It really depends on who you are as a person. I'll also say like, let me take a minute if I need to gather my thoughts, but I just kind of like saying everything out loud.
Yeah.
But that's a little tricky because you have to just make sure it doesn't seem very jumbled.
So would you say that it's better to kind of like take a minute and like organize everything first, or like actually like verbalize, just like not really think about it and like verbalize what your thoughts are like while you're.
Again, it depends on you as a person and how fast you can think on the spot. So if you know that you're the type of person who, when you're stuck, you're gonna be there like for like a minute, you think before you start talking. If you're a type of person who can like kind of fill things in, you can talk.
I'm just trying to get as accurate answer as possible and stuff like this. Kind of stop yourself, or like give any recommendations for not going too far into like you give an estimation, you have to keep doing other estimations within your formula, I guess. Those break down a lot. Like how do you stop yourself from going too granular?
Like just keep breaking things down. I think by the point where you feel like you have answered the question, even if it's broad, you can verbally say like, this is like my estimation. Would you like me to go into more detail? And that way you can also estimate, like, do they care about you continuing to go on and on? Because maybe they do, maybe they want to, like, maybe you want to hit a certain point and they're waiting for it. But if they're like, no, that's great, and you move on, then yeah, exactly. Again, an interview, especially tech interviews, are a conversation. They're not that formal.
I think in general, like, this is kind of like a cheap answer, but like, you always need the context of like whatever company you're working at. And like, if you understand the context they operate in, you'll like have a good, like you'll have like your thumb on the pulse of like how deep you should go, because you'll know what matters for them, which is tough to learn. And then also for like just like taking time on questions thing, I think it's always good to say like, I need a second, even if you like jump at something right away, because I sometimes do that, but it's like a wrong assumption. And I don't want to like imagine working with someone who like always launches into something right without taking a second to think. So I feel like it shows a good amount of maturity, even if you say like, I need a minute, and you end up taking like 10 seconds because you like got it. Just having that like 10 seconds to like reconfirm that, and then going faster, you'll still show that you like got the answer quickly, right? Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to product strategy. So estimation is actually not the most common. We're now going into more product focused questions. So these are examples of product strategy questions. It's kind of like you already have a product and like the business aspect of growing the product. So because it's strategy facing, this type of question can be asked in a lot of product interviews, not just PM. So how you want to approach this is another 3-step framework. We're going to go with you got to have your objective, give menu of solutions and prioritize, and then give your recommendation. So first we're going to talk about your objective. Again, confirm your understanding, clarifying questions. This is a staple for anything you do. Have your questions, and then define the business objective. So let me go back to one of the questions. How would you improve Google Maps? How would you set goals and measure success? So like if we look at 3 and we're like, how would you measure success for Facebook notifications? This is kind of similar to the other question, right? Like, but except now they're telling you like, you got to set goals. So they want to see you kind of walk through that management aspect versus the other question, like that they didn't really talk about that. So first you're going to define the business objective. Then after you know that your understanding's all good, you want to create a menu of solutions. So these are all the possible actions, product improvements you can do. I would say name 3. Try to name 3. I feel like that's a good number of options. And then you're going to prioritize and highlight trade-offs. So you can walk through walk through your solutions and be like, this is the pro of this and this is the con of this. At the end, you should have a priority list. And you'll be like, this is the solution I'm moving forward with because of the pros and because the others have these cons. And then you want to give your recommendation. So make sure you actually verbally say, we're moving forward with this. And I recommend using this to do this. I know I'm saying this a lot. And then you also want to highlight risks and next steps, because again, it's kind of like the estimation question where you want to be open to showing errors. You want to be open to showing the risks in the solution. No solution is perfect. So make sure you can highlight those. And the interviewer will like know that you're really trying to think deeply about what could happen. So back to example questions. Which ones do you guys want to go through? Again, these are all real company questions like that have happened. Yes.
I feel like number 5 is really confusing.
Okay, number 5. Imagine you're a PM that works with big data. Now what? So the thing with tech questions is sometimes they can give you something like this. And you're like, what the fuck is this question, right? Like, it's not even a question. They're just telling you now what. it's so broad, it's so open-ended. What do you do with it? But that's the thing, when you work in tech, especially in product, they might just give you a really open-ended thing. They're like, I want you to build a product that helps Facebook do this. And you're like, okay, but like now what? What do I do? Like it's so broad. So they're also trying to test like, can you take that really broad thing and condense it into a solution? So let's first confirm our understanding. Any questions that you would ask your interviewer?
Maybe like, we have like a timeline for what we're trying to do. Like, within a year versus 10 years.
Okay, time constraints. Anyone else?
Like, where's this needed? Or if you need even more of a specific thing, what's the most urgent thing that this is needed for?
Priority. That's good.
I'll give an answer to those. Let's just say like we're a big tech co. We're measuring all this data. We're not doing a lot with it right now. We're looking at ways to like meet our next quarter objective. Keep it like they probably try and keep it broad.
So our priority is meeting next quarter projection.
Yeah, trying to like increase revenue.
Anything else you would ask?
Is there any budget?
Is there any budget? Okay, so what's the money behind it?
I'm not sure if this is appropriate, but can I ask what the data is about? Like, what exactly the data was?
Yeah, why not? You can
What
like
is the-
ask anything. Anything else you would ask? Oh, is it confirming if it's a data analytics company? Do you want to continue with your? Do you want to be the interviewer?
Sure. Let's say we're Spotify. We have like all this information on like what people are like listening to, like what they're searching, but we feel like we're not doing enough with it. And we have a shit ton of users. But like you have big data. Like how are you gonna like try and find a way to increase revenue?
Which questions did we not answer?
Maybe like if you're in the US or this is like a more international scope.
Okay, location scope of the question. Okay, so moving on. What are some solutions? I want three ways to increase revenue if you are at Spotify and you have a shit ton of data. What are new things you can do? You have to be kind of creative with this type of question. It's less like logic based, because now you're trying to brainstorm like actual product solutions.
Also, like to give context, like that's probably what a lot of PMs are thinking about in terms of like daily active users at Meta right now, right? Like after last earnings report, they're probably trying to think all sorts of ways so they can get people back.
I'd say like with this, you kind of numbers and like find a pattern within all the complexity, I guess. And just like one thing that I thought that might make sense is looking at maybe like what type of music is listened to by users, or like when people listen to music at what time during the day. And see if you can maybe find like a common thread of genres of music that are most popular, and you can actually say playlist for people or something based on the time of day.
Okay,
So that's one solution.
we got a solution.
Using time to recommend you playlists.
Yes.
I have a question. So, I know like Spotify, like people pay like a monthly subscription plan to access like any stream or whatever. Does the amount of time that you listen, like, does Spotify earn more money, like when you listen, regardless of like, because you know how like you pay like a flat fee, right?
If you have a subscription plan,
And if you have a subscription plan, like does Spotify make more revenue off of a user that listens to like 100,000 minutes per year versus like someone that maybe only listens to 1,000 minutes per year?
It would be a great question to ask like for clarification on. Like what I was gonna ask back to you is like, how is this gonna revert back to our goal of making more revenue? Like, is it gonna get more people to listen to ads off plans, or is it somehow gonna get more people to sign up?
I would say it overall increases, like it would increase the competitive advantage of Spotify over other music platforms, because the ability to have like creative playlists, or to, I guess, understand better than the user what the music they like and at what time, would make them choose Spotify over other platforms? It just provides more utility.
So maybe it makes it more sticky, reduces churn. Yeah, okay. Those are things we can measure with our big data. Yeah.
I'm thinking like, for me, like, I really like Spotify Wrapped. Like, I like seeing like the data about myself. So maybe you could take like some of this data and like present it. I know like there's apps that do that for you actually. Maybe you could integrate that as part of Spotify. And maybe to increase revenue, you could be like, this is only like 50 cents extra a month or something like that. Like make them just pay straight up for the new feature, I guess.
So you could add a new pay. Okay, that's another solution. Adding a new payment option for more wrap style information.
Yeah, so we're adding a new paid feature on top of the plan.
Yeah,
Second
okay.
solution, give me one more. Oh, I want to choose people.
In the bad.
Like ticketing for events or something.
Yeah, that's something else to even.
I actually did my consumer behavior project on Spotify and how they should integrate into the ticketing industry. So I'm on board with that. You know how Spotify has like the concerts feature? I think they should add like they should buy tickets and apps.
Also, for more context on like Spotify, they pay an artist for the song stream once you hit 30 seconds in. So like low key, if you listen to more,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, if you listen to more, it's more expensive for them. So it's like that balance of like making sure you stay on the platform versus like them paying cents every 30 seconds.
Okay, so now we have 3 solutions, and we've come up with our menu, and now we want to prioritize and highlight our trade-offs. So we have solution number 1, we're going to use big data to look at time and therefore create a more personalized experience for our users, make Spotify more sticky. Solution number 2, we are going to create a add-on paid feature that's going to collect data for our users, give that Spotify Wrapped experience, not just at the end of the year, but every month. And 3, we're going to add ticketing into the Spotify concert feature. So does anyone have like pros and cons? Like you think one stands out of all the 3 and like we should make that our priority that we're moving on with?
Like in terms of like general flow, like this would be like a great time to like take a, okay, came with these 3 solutions. I'm gonna take a minute to like write down my pros and cons and decide to focus on one more specifically. Yeah.
They're all just taking a minute.
Like I see a lot of you right now. Yeah.
I don't know if I have one that I like more than the others, but like an idea that I thought is that the tickets, you're gonna need like a more upfront capital investment to actually buy the tickets. So like if they don't have that money available, then that could be like a constraint that makes like that solution not ideal.
Yeah, so you can like this is you making your priority. So now we're like, okay, maybe we're bumping that solution down a little bit. Not because it's a bad idea, but because maybe it's not like the most feasible to do right now. And you just say that to them. You're like, okay, I'm not going to choose this one because of that reason.
I think the first one is kind of the most like simplistic and feasible. It's because it's kind of something they already do, so you can just improve upon their ability to kind of recommend songs and make songs more sticky. And I think that's probably the simplest way to do it.
Yeah, so you can say like, hey, we have all this data. We don't have to buy new capital. We don't have to really change our working process. Compared to the other solutions, I just think this is the easiest to implement, the fastest to implement. And that's why I'm going to prioritize it.
I think one advantage of the Spotify Wrapped function is that like after people buy it, they like share it on like all the social media platforms. So it could in turn attract maybe new users to Spotify or maybe people who are already on Spotify to buy it so that they can share with you.
Yeah, so maybe, yeah, you want to prioritize that because we're going to get new users. We're like acquiring new users is super expensive. So like, can we do it in a really like a cheaper way? So as you guys can tell, like everyone will have different opinions on what they think is the best thing. And again, there's no right answer. As long as you have a reasoning behind why you choose that one. After you prioritize, talk about like why you picked a certain thing. You're going to give your recommendation. So in this case, for the sake of time, I'm just going to go with solution one. I'm going to say, I want to use my data to look at the time, and we're going to create more personalized playlists for our users. That's going to make our product a lot more competitive, and that's why I want to choose it. The risks of this is it might not generate as much revenue as quickly as, say, the second solution, Spotify Wrapped, every month. But in the long run, I do believe that this will help us retain customers, and we don't have to acquire new ones. So that's that. That is the product strategy example. Product design, I'm going to go over real quick, but we have an old recording of this, I believe, on YouTube. This is Alex's framework. So we got questions, users, pain points, solutions, prioritize. And you might want to go something like this: go broad, go narrow. I personally like using, it's called the double diamond approach. So you have the question, you go broad, and you're like, what are all the problems? What are all the problems in the question? You create all the problems, pick at least like 2 to 3. Then you're going to go down. You're going to say, okay, this is the problem I prioritize. Then you're going to go up again, and you're going to say, okay, I'm going to pick a bunch of solutions. And then you're going to go down again, and you're going to say, this is the solution I go with. So thank you, Andre. It's kind of similar to the product strategy question, but we're talking less about business now. We care less about the business. Now we're thinking about users and like their experience of using the product. Like, I'm not thinking about revenue now. The other one I was thinking about revenue. I'm not thinking about revenue now. Now I'm thinking about the issues we have with the product and what's going to make users stay. So that's what makes it a little different, product design versus strategy. Designers don't, like, you don't know anything about business. Strategists most likely will. But you should use some kind of like diamond approach. This is kind of like similar diamond, go broad, go narrow. But he has like user groups. Then we got the pain points, which is like the problems, solutions. So that is, there are a lot of different approaches. But I feel like if I want to generalize all the frameworks we've talked about today, ask clarifying questions. Make sure that you are able to communicate every step of like what you're saying, and learn how to take a bunch of stuff, whether that's a menu of solutions or a bunch of data, a bunch of information that you need to estimate, and condense it into like one thing and why you got to that point. Here are a few resources I like. So this top one is a podcast, and we have 3 books. I really recommend the PM interview. It's a website. It's a website. They just keep generating you questions. So every time you hit enter, you get a new question. So if you want to practice your interviewing, recommend that website. I also really like these 3 Slack channels. So I frequent them a lot for like events or opportunities, different things. So yeah, feel free to take a picture of this. These are things I personally use and recommend.
Also with like Exponent, there's like a few YouTube channels kind of like this right now. But if you know you have an interview with a particular company, they'll have videos like like typical PM interview with like an Amazon.
Oh
PM.
yeah. If you
So
have a
like
certain company.
they'll say like obviously companies have like certain things they look for, like company values, and you can like learn those through those videos.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
That's my last slide. Yay! I hope this was helpful to everyone. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out. A lot of people on eBoard are going into tech, so happy to answer anything.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Audrey.